everybody. My name is Jonathan Schooler, and I'm a professor of psychological and brain sciences at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Today, I want to talk about what we've been calling the three dimensions of time, an approach for conceptualizing how consciousness relates to the physical world. And the basic conjecture, and this corresponds to also a paper that I co-authored with Justin Riddle, is that we can postulate three dimensions of time, and that by doing so, this may provide a metaphysical foundation for addressing several key limitations of reconciling subjective experience with physical reality. And I want to emphasize at the outset that this is what's known as a toy model, so it's highly simplified. I'm certain that it's wrong in significant ways, but I'm hoping that it will provide an example of the kind of theory that I think we may need in order to address some really sort of startling discrepancies between time as it is experienced and time as it's characterized in modern science. So let's begin by talking about the experience of time and our relationship to it. And I want to emphasize here that oftentimes sort of our primary experiences are swept under the rug as just being an illusion, or we can't really make anything of it. But in a very fundamental sense, we start based on our experiences. Our experience is the foundation for the assumptions that we make about the world. And I want to make the argument that there are 3 or 4 self-evident truths about existence that have as much ontological merit, that is, there is clearly indicative of reality as anything that we might find in science. Science, in many ways, relies on our observations, on our experience, and so to dismiss these also fundamental aspects of experience, I think, is problematic. So here we go. I'm going to be presenting 4 what I call self-evident truths, but they're in my order of certainty. So the first one I'm absolutely positively certain of. The next one I'm highly confident about, but to a slightly lesser degree, and so on. And I think that we oftentimes don't acknowledge that our axioms themselves might vary in our certainty with them, but nevertheless, they serve as axioms. And so even though all 4 of these things vary to some degree in how absolutely certain I am about them, I feel like they are reasonable candidates for axioms of existence. Okay, so the first one, and this harkens back to Descartes, is that experience exists. I am participating in consciousness. Now, I don't exactly know what I is, so when Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, I find that a little bit problematic because I'm not sure about the I, about the me. What I am sure about is that experience is happening. This experience, it could all be an illusion. I could be dreaming. I could be a brain in a vat. I could be in the matrix. But wherever the experience is happening, the occurrence of experience is a real thing. Even a illusion has a real experience to it. The next thing is that experience is defined by change. The essential nature of experience is that it's always moving from one moment to the next moment to the next moment to the next moment. Even if I was having a totally empty experience where all I was experiencing is experience itself, there would be one moment of experience followed by the next moment experience, the next. There's this necessary flow to subjective experience. You could almost say that consciousness is to time as matter is to space. You can't have matter without some space to expand in. You can't have consciousness without time, without being able to move in time. The third notion, axiom I would call it, is that experience is always now. We can remember the past, we can imagine the future, but we're always doing that in the present. And the present has a little bit of a thickness to it, what William James referred to as the specious present, where we have some expansion. You can kind of imagine it as a flip book, and our experience is always the time between one page in the flip book and the next page in the flip book. We're never stuck on an individual space. We're always in the now, but the now is intrinsically dynamic. And then the fourth one, and I will acknowledge that this one I have less confidence in than the others, but nevertheless, it certainly is a quality of our everyday existence, everyone's everyday existence, even those individuals who forcefully deny the existence of free will, acknowledge that the experience of free will is very compelling, that we are making choices between possible alternative futures, and those matter. There are some individuals, Sam Harris, for example, who suggests that even the phenomenology of free will is not really there. But for the most part, most of us have a powerful experience of being agents in the world. Now, the interesting thing is that all of these fundamental assumptions about existence are challenged by science and in some cases philosophy. You might think that consciousness might be free from that, but indeed the eminent late philosopher Daniel Dennett argued that consciousness itself was an illusion, and Michael Graziano, a neuroscientist, has made a similar argument. And the problem is that there's just no way to understand how consciousness relates to the physical world. This is known by David Chalmers as the hard problem of consciousness. And this challenge is so problematic that one very compelling move is just to say, well, we're just imagining that we're having a subjective experience, and that makes the problem go away. Some people renamed Daniel Dennett's book Consciousness Explained Away. And Michael Graziano has suggested in the same way that we've come to realize that free will is an illusion, we will come to recognize that consciousness is an illusion. And so there's this notion then that we're just imagining that we're conscious, that we're actually what's been known as a philosophical zombie, someone that seems like a normal human but does not have conscious experience, sense experience, or qualia. Now, even if we acknowledge that not all scientists have dismissed consciousness, I think by and large, all scientists would acknowledge that they have really no idea how it is that this 3-pound meatloaf of a brain is able to produce something that's so not like matter as consciousness. So this is a real challenge for what's known as material reductionism. The second sort of discrepancy between our experience of time and time as it's characterized by modern physics is the flow of time. Theoretical physicists say that the flow of time is an illusion of consciousness. As Paul Davies said, nothing in known physics corresponds to the passage of time. Indeed, physicists insist that time doesn't flow at all. It merely is. Similarly, the notion that the present is an essential aspect of physical reality or it has some privileged quality, is also challenged. And I'll explain both of why these are challenged momentarily, as seen by this quote by Albert Einstein, who said, "People like us who believe in physics know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." Basically, the idea is that the experience of the present is just from the perspective of where you are right now, but the past is still, in a sense, happening, the future is still existing, and so on. And then finally, of course, everyone, or not everyone, but many people know that modern science and philosophy has oftentimes rejected the notion of free will. As Neil deGrasse Tyson said, you have the illusion of free will, but in fact, that illusion comes because you don't know the future, because you are a prisoner of the present, forever locked in transition between the past and future. Again, this is just from the perspective of the observer. In modern physics, the past, the present, the future all exist simultaneously. And because they all exist, there's nothing special about the present. So why do physicists reject the flow of time and the privileged present? As I said, now appears to move from one moment to the next in a steady flow, but physicists believe this is an illusion. And the reason why physicists think this is because they conceptualize reality as existing within a block universe. So here we have a block universe. You can see the Earth and at multiple different rotations, and the moon circling around it. The way that this is conceptualized is what's happened is they've taken the 3 dimensions of space, compressed them into 2. So we have 2 dimensions of space and then a 3rd dimension of time. And this follows out quite naturally from relativity theory. And so the basic idea is that from the very beginning of time to the very end of time, if there even is such a thing, perhaps it stretches on infinity, but presumably it's from the Big Bang to wherever we want to call the end, all exist as separate slices, like a bread loaf, slice, 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 slice. So your birth, your childhood, all of that is all there in the block universe. And what makes you think that you're in the present is simply that that's where you're experiencing right at this particular moment. But there's another you that's experiencing the past and another you that's experiencing the future as long as you live. And this is the way that physicists imagine time being represented. It's really a static measure of time. I once asked the theoretical physicist and popularizer, a very talented popularizer of physics notions, Brian Greene, how he reconciles the self-evident dynamic quality of experience with the static characterization that physics makes of the physical world. And he said, I see a psychiatrist. Consciousness is capable of all sorts of illusions, and the flow of time is just another one. Frankly, I don't think a psychiatrist would help me with this problem. To me, the flow of time is an essential aspect of existence. So here we see an event as experienced by an observer. We move from frame to frame to frame to frame. And here is it represented in the block universe, where every single frame is all there simultaneously, and there's no movement through it. There's no opportunity to move through it because we are existing simultaneously in all the different frames. So herein lies the rub. Science provides absolutely no way of conceptualizing the 4 most self-evident aspects of existence: experience, the flow of time, the uniqueness of now, and the capacity for a genuine choice. So this suggests, I would argue, the need for scientific humility, that we need to reconcile that there is a powerful discrepancy between what seem to be really self-evident aspects of existence and the way that time is being characterized in modern physics at the moment. And so this raises the likelihood, or at least the possibility, that science will need to find a place for subjectivity in its foundation. I'm not the first and surely not the last to suggest this, but it is definitely a minority view. The general primary view at the moment is that subjectivity is just a product of our brain. It really doesn't have anything to do with the fundamental ontology, the fundamental nature of reality. So what is missing? What is missing from this this block universe model that is preventing consciousness from having a place within it? And what I would argue is that what is missing is the degree of freedom to enable an observer to move through objective time and have genuine alternative options. What you see here is that you've got a block universe And time is taken up as one of the primary dimensions. So you can't move through it, because at what rate would you move through it? You'd be moving a second per second. It doesn't make any sense. We don't have the degrees of freedom necessary to move through the block universe. So my provocative speculation is that perhaps experience requires the postulation of additional dimensions of time that provides the degree of freedom necessary to enable consciousness to move in relation to physical time. So my first, and I admit that this is a highly speculative suggestion and needs a lot of fleshing out, but my first speculation is the existence of a subjective dimension of time. Now, if you think about it, a subjective dimension of time makes great sense, at least psychologically. And I would want to emphasize that even if this model can't be integrated into physics for assorted possible reasons, it still represents, I think, a very compelling characterization of the way we experience time. And of course, our experience is such a fundamental aspect of existence. And we see this when we think about the psychological importance of the disparities between time as it passes objectively and time as it experienced passing. So when you have a car accident, it seems as if time slows down. As we get older, it seems as if time goes faster. When individuals are manic versus depressed, they have very different experiences of their movement in time. So it seems very plausible to imagine that you could imagine that we're moving in objective time relative to subjective time. Sometimes when you're having an accident, you're moving slowly in subjective time relative to objective time, so that you actually are able to see all sorts of things seemingly unfold, although there's some interesting research suggesting that your discriminations done by David Eagleman may not be any enhanced, but that's an interesting question, one I'd like to return to perhaps at some other time. But the point is that at least experientially, sometimes it seems like we're moving fast, and sometimes it seems like we're moving slow. This could be accounted for by postulating a subjective dimension of time. So if we add a subjective dimension of time, that then provides also an additional degree of freedom, because now we're moving in objective time relative to subjective time. So if we return to those breaking glasses that I was showing before, now with an additional dimension, we can move through it, where each moment in objective time corresponds to a different moment in subjective time. So here we are moving through the block universe with an additional dimension, and now you are able to introduce movement and motion, and hold on to this because we'll come back to this in just a second. So now let's return to the block universe model, but now introducing an additional dimension of subjective time. So what I've done in this image here is I've now further compressed physical space, not just into two dimensions, as was done before in the block universe, but into a single dimension. So we now have one dimension of physical space and one dimension of objective time, giving us a two-dimensional plane. And here you can see that the observer is in every moment simultaneously in this block pancake, essentially. And that there's no way for the observer to be, for there to be a special present or for flow, because it's in every moment simultaneously. But now, when we add a subjective dimension, all of a sudden we can talk about the observer being in objective time relative to subjective time, and that then gives the observer the opportunity to move through subjective and objective time simultaneously, and this allows you to have a flow of time and also successive moments of now. So by introducing subjective time, we can now characterize each individual now as corresponding to the coordinates in subjective versus physical time. And you can see then by having this additional dimension, we also now can move through the block universe. Each one of these different steps corresponds to a different step in objective time relative to subjective time. So the postulation of a subjective dimension provides the opportunity to enable us to have a privileged present and a flow of time. Now you might ask, what defines an individual moment, and I think this is something that we could begin to quantify and think through more deeply. But one way of thinking about it is the capacity for temporal discrimination. And there's actually some interesting research on this. There's something known as flicker fusion, which is you flash a light very quickly, like a strobe light, and at some point you're no longer experiencing it flashing, you experience it as a continuous light. And you can actually train different animals to discriminate between whether experiencing a flashing light versus continuous light. And what's been found is that different animals show a different flicker fusion rate. So there's with respect to vertebrates, smaller animals have a faster flicker fusion rate than larger animals. That is to say, the smaller animals seem to have more, seem to be moving slower in subjective time relative to objective time. They can notice discriminations, temporal discriminations that we can't. And so this raises this really intriguing idea that smaller animals may move through subjective time relative to physical time at a faster rate than larger animals. So this may be why it's so hard to swat a fly, because for us, we may seem like we're moving in slow motion to the fly. So when you try to swat a fly, the fly may see you going, wah, like that, and they easily avoid it. When we imagine this existence of subjective time, we can also imagine that different individuals, as I just said, are moving in subjective time relative to objective time at different rates. So here we have one observer moving essentially faster in subjective time than objective time, taking lots of small steps, and another observer taking fewer big steps. And we can imagine, I'll come back to this later on, that as organisms become more and more sophisticated and have more and more information in every moment of time, then the amount of information is greater, and so it takes a bigger step. Like a large animal takes a bigger step than a small animal, and a big brain takes a larger step in subjective time than a little brain, carrying more information in every step. Okay, so I've now postulated two dimensions of time, objective time and subjective time, but as you may have noticed, I've titled my talk Three Dimensions of Time. So could there be a second objective dimension of time besides the dimension of clock time, which is the dimension that I've talked about so far? And here, I'd like to postulate the possibility of time branching. And this certainly, there's a lot of intuition to this, that at every moment there are multiple possible next moments that might exist. And this is actually a key aspect of the many worlds theory of physics. In the many worlds theory of physics, there's this notion that observation of quantum events is associated with the splitting of the universe. So there's the classic notion of Schrodinger's cat, which is in this box, and the determination about whether or not a particular poisonous gas is released depends on the particular characteristic or location of a quantum event that's taking place in the box. And you won't know what happened to that quantum event until you look at it. And this is known as the collapse of the wave function, and in the standard model. And the notion that Everett suggested is that, in fact, when you take a look in the box, what's happening is the universe is actually splitting. It's branching. There's one branch in which the observer is seeing a live cat, and another branch in which the observer is seeing a dead cat. So in this model, we are constantly branching off. Different versions of us are branching off into different universe, different timelines in every moment. It's actually in many ways, the least parsimonious model ever imagined, because it postulates this constant branching of entire universes all the time, everywhere, and it's really just almost impossible to imagine. And yet, this model is one of the primary interpretations of quantum physics at the moment. The model that I'm suggesting is related to this in the notion that it presents the possibility of genuine possible next moments, possible splitting, but rather than you branching off in every different direction at every possible quantum instance, consciousness just goes down one of the multiple possible branches. So the idea then is that we have something that we can think of as observer windows, which are rotating in the second dimension of objective time, and in so doing, choosing one of possible next moments. Each one of us is at every moment moving in alternative time and thereby enabling different possible next moments from being realized. So this, by adding this second dimension of objective time, alternative time, this provides consciousness the opportunity to select alternative futures and thereby provides room for free will. So we can capture this model by looking at it in the following way. And again, I've associated the dimensions of time with particular coordinates in a three-dimensional space. This is somewhat arbitrary, but I think that this approach kind of works. So in this model, we have subjective time is going up, and objective time is going forward, and alternative time is going left and right. So from this view, if you were, and each one of us is essentially a window that's moving through these three dimensions of time. So now if you are going straight up, that would be as if time stood still. You'd experience the clock stopping. This may be what mystical experiences are like, where it's just purely moving in subjective time. If someone passed away, perhaps, if we are willing to even entertain that possibility that consciousness could exist, it may be that they're continuing to move just in subjective time for some period of time. And then objective time is moving forward. So if you're under anesthesia, then you would experience nothing at all. You'd be just moving in objective time, but there'd be no experience at all. If you're in a car accident, you'll experience a contraction in experience, and you'll time will go more and more slowly, and then if you are in a say a very deep conversation, time will go faster and faster. And then we also have the left and right, and that's the choosing of different alternatives. Now, that's the basic three dimensions of time. I want to introduce one further twist to this. This is in another paper, Nested Observer Windows paper. And in this model, we have a observer window. This is sort of the using the metaphor of a theater of existence, or theater in which consciousness takes place. And each one of us is essentially, and what I'll be referring to as an apex window. So we are sort of the top window in of our organism. But then there are multiple additional windows in our system at lower levels, and they are actually potentially having a dialogue with one another. This is like internal family systems, where you have multiple different individuals that are sort of happening within oneself. And then there's mosaic tiling, and this is, I think, the most original aspect of this notion, where every window is itself both a window unto itself and also a pixel for the lower level windows. And so when we have an experience, we're actually experiencing all these pixels of lower level windows, which themselves may be having a conscious experience. So this is also known as the mosaic print metaphor. So here we have a image of a Charlie Chaplin, but if we zoom in, we see that each of the individual windows is themselves a pixel. And the notion is that these different windows, each one of them may be having some type of experience. And so the notion is that these windows may take place at the level of different brain networks that may have their own independent experience. at the level of individual neurons, possibly at the level of proteins, and possibly even lower down, so that there may be windows upon windows upon windows. And this is a sort of basic characterization of the quality of the organization of information integration and of consciousness perhaps itself, where we have windows upon windows upon windows of consciousness, and the experience that you're having is just the apex window, which is integrating lower level windows of consciousness, which themselves are integrating lower level windows of consciousness, which are themselves integrating lower level windows of consciousness. And a intriguing idea is that this apex window is moving at sort of the slowest rate of its subjective time relative to objective time, and the lower level windows are moving faster. So they're integrating information, and they're also happening earlier in time. So they're actually a little bit ahead of us. That's how they're able to present all the information that we get in this integrated way, because they're actually processing reality a little bit ahead of us. And we can imagine then that we have these all these windows nested, moving simultaneously through the three dimensions of time. So here we have the nested observer windows in the three dimensions of time, and each lower level window is integrating with its higher level window, and there can be up, down, crosstalk. In the paper that with Justin Riddle, we talk about how resonant frequency may be the way in which different windows communicate with each other. And that's something that I have to save for another conversation. So this then provides a possible way of imagining how we can integrate the experience of time and possibly the experience of lower level aspects of our organism into a coherent model. I know I've gone through a whole lot, and I want to emphasize again that I'm just introducing this as a toy model, as a possible way of imagining how this might represent a way of thinking about relating consciousness to physical reality. But even if it doesn't work as a model of relating consciousness to physics, it still represents a intriguing way of thinking about how we experience the flow of time. And also, I think it could make for a really good virtual reality video game. So let me suggest what that might look like. So you could imagine an individual who is moving through time, and they're able to make choices and choose between alternate possible futures. Time is coming at them, and as it does so, the individual makes their choices, and then those choices are then represented by history. So you could sort of, this provides then sort of an architecture for a video game. You could control time by through movement. If you were to lean forward, that would allow you to take short steps in subjective time relative to objective time, sort of experiencing time more like a fly. Or if you were to lean backward, you then get the bigger picture and time slows down and you have more information in every moment. You can move left and right and experience different possible characterizations and unfoldings of the experience that you are in. And then there is a cone of time which represents your path through the possible alternative possibilities that you might have gone through. And so here you can see your choices and having gone one way or the other. One final thing that I'd like to point out is that I've suggested each one of us is the apex of the nested observer window model, but the notion of this possibility that each one of that consciousness is represented as a window that is integrating lower level pixels raises the possibility that perhaps each one of us could be a pixel to some larger level consciousness. And not to get too full of itself, but that consciousness could then be a pixel to yet a larger level consciousness. And it is very interesting to sort of notice this fractal quality of the universe and the sort of striking parallels between nerve cells and galaxy clusters. So a lot of very provocative ideas. I wouldn't rest my hat on any of them, but I hope I've given you some material to think about and play with, and perhaps this will inspire other broad-ranging sort of perspectives about how to integrate consciousness with a physical reality. So in summary then, I've introduced a speculative model of time and consciousness. I've suggested that time may involve three dimensions: objective time, which is like clock time; subjective time, which is time as it's experienced; and alternative time. And this represents the many branches of possibilities and provides an opportunity for free will. Observers move through time as nested observer windows, and each window looks out on pixels of lower level windows as a pixel and a higher level window. And I didn't get into this, but integrates holons at every level. A holon is this notion that we're organizing material into some sort of whole at every moment. And one thing that Windows may do at every level is to integrate the information into meaningful wholes at that level. Again, I'd like to close just by acknowledging some of my co-authors, most notably Justin Riddle and Ham Hunt, and colleagues Amanda Gregory, postdocs, and grant support from various different institutions. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope I've given you something to chew on.